You walk along an empty road, void of life other than the sound of your own footsteps hitting the pavement. Thick fog obscures your vision, allowing you only to see 20 or so feet around you. Nothing is inherently frightening, and perhaps contextualized in another way, you may find this all quite peaceful. But here now, something feels wrong. The unknown pulls at you. The world beyond your sight holds more possibility of danger than safety, and indeed, in this world of Silent Hill, we know that to be true. But pretend for a moment we don't. If this world could be both peaceful and dangerous, what is it about our environment that has us on edge? What signals are being sent to our brain to elicit our fear response?
Hello, and welcome to The Stash. I'm your host Z-Man, and today we'll be examining one of the key characteristics that make up the horror genre: the weather.
We've all heard a story that starts with a dark and stormy night. It's such a cliche at this point, it's become a household phrase used even by this well-known cute pup. But in fact, it was first used by the author Edward Bulwer Lytton in his novel Paul Clifford in 1830. And while the novel itself isn't a scary story per se, the melodrama of that opening line has stuck with us and literature as a cornerstone setting. It evokes a feeling inside all of us that we all know well. Sitting at home during a storm can be both incredibly peaceful, but also awakens in us a sense of wonder and unknown. Storms and weather in general are experiences everyone, regardless of who they are, share. A 2009 New York Times investigation found that homicide rates in New York drop significantly on rainy days, as heavy rain is seen to reduce or suppress crime. So weather itself has a tangible effect on the human mind. When the sky is overcast or sunlight is blocked, the hormone inside our bodies, serotonin, decreases, which in turn can increase our carb cravings and make you hungry. Knowing that, we can reasonably assume that weather, aside from the obvious environmental changes, affects us in ways that we can't even see. In literature, as I described earlier, weather is used as a device for setting, but it's also used as a tool for metaphors. Water is seen as pure and cleansing. It rejuvenates the world around us, but it also slowly erodes and eats away at that same world, as seen in geographical landmarks like the Grand Canyon. In games like Heavy Rain or Silent Hill Downpour, the rain is nearly constant. Did you ever ask yourself if that rain is meant to cleanse our protagonists of their sins and liberate them when it passes? Or is it meant to be a visual representation of our characters being so drenched in their own guilt that they are literally soaked in it? And if it is meant to cleanse, what does that mean for a protagonist in games such as PT, when it's always just out of reach, or Death Stranding, in which the mere touch of rain could physically hurt you? A brilliant utilization of rain comes from a classic film we're all very familiar with now, The Matrix. In it, we see Neo existing in a dreary world we later are told is said Matrix. We're shown images of rain nearly identically matching that of the code of the Matrix itself. And when he finally sees the world for what it really is, there's no longer sunlight. And out come humans brought upon themselves to weaponize against their enemies, but in turn ruin the world to such an extent we can't even survive in it. In Death Stranding, the rain carries matter that can age us rapidly and eventually kill us. An unfortunate byproduct of humans' experimentation and innovation. Therefore, in these two examples, rain itself represents that same duality of rejuvenation, but also complete destruction.
And the examples are endless, but in order to keep this video brief, I won't be diving too deeply into the premise of any game or film, as those musings could be videos all on their own. But stepping away from metaphors now, what about the sensory implications of rain and weather? The sound of rainfall can be incredibly peaceful. People often use it to fall asleep with pink noise machines or apps. It calms the mind.
But in a life or death situation, the loud hammering of thunder and rain could mask the sounds of danger. Backing us into a corner and utilizing our fear of the unknown activates our flight or fight response, such as the infamous witch level in Left 4 Dead. And with storms bring darkness and nyctophobia, the fear of the dark, one of the most common fears in the entire world, and something almost every single child remembers growing up. Stormy weather doesn't always mean rain. What about games that utilize fog, or rain's colder cousin, snow? John Carpenter's The Thing utilizes snow and cold to highlight its isolation. Scientists discover a forgotten horror buried beneath the purity of snow, only to succumb to their hubris and release a creature that seeks nothing but to corrupt our world. In Dead Space 3, our protagonist Isaac finds himself fighting for his life in a twisted version of Hoth. But in this entry in the series, many of the horrific events take place in broad daylight with the beauty of snow-capped mountains paired against the horror that he faces. This gives us a prime example of a technique called scenic dissonance, in which unpleasant scenarios are both presented in settings with pleasant scenery, and vice versa. Both of these examples highlight the cycle that is winter, the world's natural death cycle, killing off vegetation and shortening our days only to give us longer nights and eventually rebirth. Surrounding us in cold could be seen as a technique to physically manifest pain and sadness, as seen in the brilliant indie title Cold Shot, where someone's sadness has manifested as a frigid being seeking to consume any warmth left in the world.
However, weather has been used for many different reasons other than metaphor and setting. By now, we all know the story of the original Team Silent and their struggles with the graphical capabilities of the first-generation PlayStation. Their ingenious workaround to mask render distance was to coat the town in a thick fog and a light snowfall,
therefore creating an impending sense of dread around every corner, but also allowing the GPU to render assets as they were needed. What they didn't realize is that that same eerie emptiness would go on to create an aesthetic that would define Silent Hill's mysteries and the questions it presented its players. The drastic contrast between this world and the other world, smothering the pain of the past in this fog-laden world where the sleepy town's sins could almost be forgotten. Almost. As I've said before, the examples I've given are only a small handful, and there are endless examples in film, literature, and games. But it's clear that the utilization of weather to elicit a subconscious response is here to stay.
But that's the beauty of these ideas. What do they all mean to you? Elements like weather are so general that their power lies in the fact that they can make us feel something on a deeper level, so intensely personal that it layers our own experiences as much physically as it does mentally. If you have an experience of your own in a game, book, movie, or another medium, I'd absolutely love to hear about it in the comments section, as I'm sure you all have some extraordinary examples of how weather has affected you in some way, in some form of media. So let me know down below. But until then, I've been your host Z, signing off. Thank you for tuning into The Stash. Stay spooky, and I'll see you real soon.